Everyone knows one. The person who laughs when they should listen, who speaks when they should think, who stumbles through life making the same mistakes on repeat and somehow never connects the dots. We call them a fool, and we say it like it's simple, like it's obvious, like it's something they just are. But here's what nobody stops to ask. What actually makes a person a fool? Is it low intelligence? Is it bad choices? Is it something they were born with? Or something that was built into them so slowly, so quietly, that they never even saw it happening? Because the more psychology looks at this, the more uncomfortable the answer becomes. Stay till the end, because by the time this is over, you might realize the fool isn't always who you think it is. Let's start with what a fool actually is. Not the joker in a deck of cards, not the court jester, the real psychological definition. A fool is not simply someone who makes mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. A fool is someone who makes the same mistakes repeatedly and genuinely cannot see why. That's the key word, cannot. Not will not, cannot. Because here's what separates a fool from someone who simply made a bad decision. A bad decision maker learns. They feel the consequence, they adjust, they move differently next time. It hurts, but the pain teaches something. A fool doesn't get that lesson. Not because the pain isn't there, but because something between the experience and the understanding is broken. And that something has a name in psychology. It's called insight. The ability to look at your own behavior honestly and understand what it's producing. And the research is very clear. Insight is not evenly distributed. Some people have a deep, almost painful ability to see themselves clearly, and some people have almost none at all. The fool almost always falls into the second category. Not because they're evil, not because they don't care, but because the internal mirror is either cracked, clouded, or was never properly formed to begin with. Now let's talk about where this comes from, because this is where it gets complicated. There is a type of foolishness that comes purely from inexperience. Young people do foolish things constantly, not because they're bad people, but because their brain's prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for consequence thinking and impulse control, isn't fully developed until around age 25. Science has proven this. This type of foolishness is temporary. Given time, exposure, and enough consequence, most people grow out of it. But there is another type, and this one doesn't resolve on its own. It's the foolishness that comes from a childhood where consequences were always softened, where someone else always cleaned up the mess, where being loved meant never being held accountable, where the people around you modeled impulsive, reactive, short-sighted behavior and called it living freely. This person grows into an adult who genuinely believes the world should still operate the way their childhood home did, that things will just work out, that someone will step in, that the rules that apply to everyone else somehow don't quite apply to them. And here's the tragedy of it. They're not pretending. They actually believe this. Which means every consequence that arrives feels like an injustice rather than a result. Pause here for a second and think about someone you know like this. Someone who always has bad luck, who is always the victim of circumstance, who can tell you in extraordinary detail how everything that went wrong in their life was caused by someone or something outside of them. Because a defining psychological characteristic of the fool is an external locus of control. The belief, deep, unconscious, completely genuine, that life happens to them rather than because of them. And when you believe that, why would you change your behavior? The problem isn't you. The problem is always out there. Now here is where the psychology gets genuinely fascinating. Research in behavioral science has identified something called dysrationalia. It's a term coined by psychologist Keith Stanovich, and it describes something very specific and very unsettling. Dysrationalia is the condition of being unable to think and behave rationally despite having adequate or even high intelligence. Read that again. You can be intelligent, measurably, testably intelligent, and still be a fool. Because intelligence and wisdom are not the same thing. Intelligence is the capacity to process information quickly and accurately. Wisdom is knowing which information matters, what consequences it carries, and how to act accordingly. A highly intelligent fool exists, and they're often the most dangerous kind, because they can construct elaborate, convincing justifications for every foolish thing they do. They can win the argument even when they're wrong. They can make the bad choice sound reasonable to everyone in the room, including themselves. This is called motivated reasoning. And the smarter you are, the better you are at it. This is why intelligence alone has never been a reliable protection against foolishness. History is full of brilliant people who made catastrophically foolish decisions in their relationships, in their finances, in their handling of power, because they used their intelligence to support what they already emotionally wanted to do, not to find what was actually true. Now let's bring this into real life, because the fool doesn't just exist in psychology textbooks. You've seen them. Maybe you've worked with them. Maybe you grew up with one. There's the fool who keeps choosing the same type of partner and genuinely cannot understand why every relationship ends the same way. They'll tell you about their bad luck in love. They won't tell you about the patterns they carry into every relationship from day one. There's the fool who burns every professional opportunity they're given, through arrogance, through carelessness, through an inability to take feedback without shutting down or blowing up. And who will tell you, with complete sincerity, that every job they've ever lost was because of unfair bosses and political environments. There's the fool who handles money the same destructive way every single month and somehow remains shocked at the outcome every single month. Because in their mind, next month will be different. Not because they will do anything differently, just because it will be different. There's the fool who says exactly the wrong thing at exactly the wrong moment, in meetings, in relationships, in conflicts, and cannot understand why people react the way they do, because they lack what psychologists call theory of mind, the ability to model how other people think and feel before you act. None of these people are lazy. None of them are trying to fail. That's the most important thing to hold on to. The fool is not a villain. The fool is someone who was never given the right tools, or was given the wrong ones so consistently that the right ones never had a chance to form. And here is where the conversation shifts, because there is one more type of fool that psychology has identified, and this one is the most humbling of all, the intermittent fool, which is all of us. Because foolishness is not a fixed personality trait that some people have and others don't. Research shows it is a state, a condition that anyone can enter under the right or wrong circumstances. When we are under extreme emotional stress, we become fools. The part of the brain responsible for clear thinking goes offline, and the emotional brain takes over. We say things we'd never say calmly. We make decisions we'd never make clearly. We act in ways that will cost us, and we know it even as we do it, and we do it anyway. When we are overconfident, which we discussed in our last video, we become fools. The Dunning-Kruger effect doesn't just affect people with low skill. It affects all of us in areas where our confidence has outpaced our competence. When we are desperate, financially, romantically, emotionally, we become fools. Desperation is perhaps the most reliable producer of foolish decisions ever identified. Because desperation collapses time. It makes the immediate feel like the only thing that exists. So the question isn't whether you are a fool. The question is, when? And about what? And whether you can see it. Because that is the dividing line. Not between smart people and stupid people. Not between educated and uneducated. Not between successful and unsuccessful. The dividing line is between the people who can look at themselves honestly and the people who cannot. The ancient Greek philosopher Socrates said something that has survived thousands of years because it is still exactly right. He said the only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing. Not as a pose, not as false humility, but as a genuine recognition that your certainty about yourself and the world is always partial. The fool's defining feature is not stupidity. It is certainty. The absolute, unshakable belief that they already understand themselves, other people, how life works. There is no room for new information because the conclusion was already reached. And wisdom, real wisdom, is simply the willingness to keep that conclusion open, to stay uncomfortable, to ask whether you might be wrong, to feel the friction of that possibility and not run from it. Now here's the most important question this video can leave you with. It's not, Who in your life is the fool? It's, in what area of your life are you still behaving like one? Where are you making the same choice and expecting a different result? Where are you telling the story of what happened without honestly examining your own role in it? Where is your certainty protecting you from something true that would change you if you let it in? That question is not comfortable. The fool never asks it. That's partly what makes them a fool. But you're here. You watched this far. And that means something is already different. The antidote to foolishness is not intelligence. It's not education. It's not success. It's the courage to be a student of yourself. Permanently, without graduation. And the moment you stop being that student is the moment the fool quietly walks back in.